was a bright Saturday morning just after 10 o'clock. A man sat quietly in his car, adjusting the brim of his baseball cap. In the mirror, he almost didn't recognize himself. Gone were the expensive suits, the polished shoes, the image of a powerful businessman. Today he wore only a plain hoodie and jeans. He wasn't here as the CEO who built a multi-million-dollar company. He was here as just another face in the crowd. With a deep breath, he stepped out and walked across the busy parking lot toward the glass doors of his own store. Shoppers moved in and out, carts rattling, children laughing. From the outside, everything looked perfect, his logo shining proudly in the morning sun. He felt a wave of pride, but it was quickly replaced by nervous energy. This visit wasn't about numbers or profits. It was about people. For weeks, he had been hearing whispers, stories of poor service, complaints about staff not treating customers with care. He had built this company on the promise that everyone mattered, no matter who they were. But was that promise still alive inside these walls? Today he would find out. Today the boss would walk into his own store in disguise, and what he discovered would change everything. Inside the store, the air felt cool against his skin, a welcome relief from the Texas sun outside. The steady hum of conversation and the squeak of shopping carts filled the space. Bright lights reflected off polished floors, and displays of colorful products stretched across the aisles. At first glance, everything looked exactly as he had hoped, organized, busy, and alive with energy. But he hadn't come here to admire the surface. He wanted to feel what it was like to be an ordinary customer, someone who didn't have a title or power. He wanted to know if people were being treated with respect, or if the whispers he had heard were true. He adjusted the strap of his worn canvas bag, reminding himself that today he was just another shopper. No one here would know his name. To them, he was only a man in a hoodie looking for something to buy. His steps carried him toward the electronics section at the far end of the store. The shelves there were lined with gadgets, headphones, and shiny speaker boxes. He slowed his pace, pretending to browse casually, picking up a pair of sleek headphones and turning them over in his hands. It wasn't the product he cared about, it was the reaction. Would someone notice him? Would anyone step forward to offer help? At the counter, a young employee leaned lazily against the surface, his attention fixed on the glowing screen of his phone. Every few seconds, his thumb scrolled with quiet rhythm, completely absorbed in whatever was on the screen. The man in disguise waited patiently, giving him a chance. Surely, he thought, at some point the worker would look up, smile, or ask if he needed help. Seconds ticked by. A family passed behind him, a mother and her 2 kids, and the employee managed a quick nod in their direction before sinking back into his phone. But toward the disguised CEO, nothing, not even a glance. The man placed the headphones back on the shelf and picked up a small speaker box. He lingered there deliberately, holding it as though deciding whether to buy. Still nothing. The worker leaned more heavily against the counter, his posture screaming disinterest. A strange knot tightened in the man's chest. This wasn't what he had imagined. He had told himself maybe he would find small cracks, little gaps in service that needed fixing, but to be standing in front of his own employee, completely invisible, was more unsettling than he expected. He reminded himself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe the worker was having a bad day. Maybe he hadn't noticed. Maybe, just maybe, the next few minutes would prove him wrong. So he stayed, pretending to browse a little longer, giving the young man every chance to step forward. But the silence stretched on. Around him, other customers laughed and chatted. An older woman nearby asked for help in another aisle, and an employee quickly came to her side with a cheerful smile. The CEO watched this small act of kindness with hope. Perhaps things weren't as bad as they seemed, yet as he turned back to the electronics counter, that hope dimmed. The worker was still on his phone, still uninterested, still blind to the customer standing only a few feet away. The disguised CEO let out a slow breath. He had come looking for the truth, and already the truth was starting to show itself. What he didn't know was that this first silent test was only the beginning, and what lay ahead would hurt far more than this quiet dismissal. He walked closer to the counter, this time holding a box of Bluetooth speakers in his hands. The packaging was bright, the kind of item that usually caught attention right away. He placed it gently on the counter, waiting for the moment when the employee would finally acknowledge him. The young man glanced up for the first time. There was no smile, no hello, not even the warmth of basic courtesy. His eyes flicked to the box and then back toward his phone. With a flat voice, he finally muttered, "Can I help you?" The words carried no real interest. It was the tone of someone forced to speak, not someone willing to serve. The CEO, still in disguise, kept his voice calm, even friendly. "Yeah, I was wondering if you could tell me more about these speakers. Do they work well outdoors?" The employee gave the box a quick, lazy look. He didn't even bother opening it or checking details. With a shrug, he said, "I don't know. Probably." His eyes were already drifting back to the screen in his hand. For a moment, the man in disguise stood silent. He could feel frustration building inside, but he refused to let it show. Instead, he gave the young man another chance. "Could you maybe check for me? I'd like to be sure before I buy." The worker sighed loudly as though he had just been asked to climb a mountain. He grabbed the box, flipped it over without care, and skimmed the fine print. "Says here they're weatherproof," he mumbled, sliding the box back across the counter. His voice carried the weight of annoyance, not service. The disguised CEO forced a small smile. "All right, thank you. And do you know if they connect easily with most devices?" The young man rolled his eyes, his patience snapping. "Look, man, all the details are on the box. You can read it yourself. Or pick something else. Doesn't matter to me." The words landed like a punch. The CEO wasn't just being brushed off. He was being dismissed as if his presence had no value. Around him, he could hear the chatter of employees helping other customers with enthusiasm. A family near the toy aisle laughed as a worker joked with their kids. An older woman at the front of the store received patient help from another staff member. Yet here he was, invisible and unworthy of the same respect. For a brief second, the CEO wondered what kind of image he must have given off. Was it his hoodie? His plain jeans? The simple canvas bag slung over his shoulder? None of it should matter, but somehow it clearly did. He decided to test one last time, though his voice carried the weight of disappointment. "You seem busy," he said softly. "Maybe someone else could help me instead." The employee gave a smirk, the corners of his mouth curling in a way that felt sharp, almost mocking. "I don't think anyone's free right now," he said, shrugging again. "Just figure it out, all right?" And with that, he turned away, picking up his phone and walking toward the back of the section, leaving the CEO standing there with the box of speakers still in his hands. The silence that followed was heavy. He placed the box back on the shelf, his chest tight with a mix of anger and sadness. This wasn't just a bad attitude. This was deeper. It was disrespect. It was indifference. And it was happening right here in a store that bore his name. He took a slow breath and steadied himself. This was only the beginning of his undercover visit, but already he knew something inside his company had gone terribly wrong. After the cold treatment in the electronics section, the man in disguise walked slowly through the aisles, his thoughts heavy. He wanted to believe that what he just experienced was an exception, not the rule. Somewhere in this store, he hoped to find proof that his company's values were still alive. He wandered toward the clothing section, where stacks of folded shirts created neat patterns of color. There, a young woman in a striped uniform jacket was carefully arranging a display. She noticed him almost immediately and looked up with a warm smile. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "Let me know if you need help with anything." The words were simple, but the sincerity in her tone was unmistakable. For the first time that morning, the disguised CEO felt seen. He nodded politely and pretended to browse, picking up a shirt as though considering it. The employee didn't hover or push, but he noticed how her attention shifted naturally between tasks. She folded items with care, then stepped aside to help an elderly man who was looking for a certain size. The CEO paused, quietly observing. She guided the man through the racks, patient and attentive, even suggesting a matching tie that brought a smile to his face. The customer thanked her warmly, and she responded with genuine kindness. The interaction was everything he had hoped his company stood for: respect, care, and connection. For a moment, relief washed over him. It reminded him of the early days when he trained employees himself and made sure every customer felt like family. This young woman, without knowing it, had given him a glimpse of what was still possible. Encouraged, he moved further into the store, curious to see more. Near the home goods section, Shelves of pots and pans gleamed under the lights. That's when he overheard something that made him freeze mid-step. Two employees leaned against the end of an aisle, speaking in low voices. They hadn't noticed him nearby. One of them tilted his head subtly in the CEO's direction. "That guy's probably just here to browse," he whispered, his tone dismissive. "People like him never buy anything big." The disguised CEO's chest tightened. He kept his eyes fixed on a set of frying pans, pretending to read the labels, but every word cut into him. The second employee chuckled, lowering his voice but not enough to hide the sting. "Yeah, he doesn't look like he's got the money for this stuff. Probably just wasting time." The CEO's grip on the pan tightened slightly before he set it down. The laughter that followed felt heavier than it should have. They didn't know him. They didn't know who he was. To them, he was just another man walking around the store in a hoodie, someone they thought wasn't worth their respect. He drew in a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. A part of him wanted to confront them immediately, to tell them who he really was, but he resisted. This undercover visit wasn't about ego, it was about the truth. And the truth was starting to show its face more clearly than ever. Trying to steady himself, he walked toward the checkout area. The line of customers moved steadily, and at the register, he spotted a middle-aged woman ringing up purchases. Her name tag read Denise. She greeted each shopper with a smile and a kind word, scanning items with practiced ease. When his turn came, she looked up and asked warmly, "Did you find everything you needed today?" Her voice carried no judgment, no disinterest, just genuine care. For a brief moment, the CEO felt the weight on his chest lift. "Not exactly," he said quietly, "but I think I'll hold off for now." Denise's smile softened. "That's all right. If you ever need anything, we're here to help." Her sincerity was undeniable. As he left the register, a mix of emotions swirled inside him. Relief, disappointment, hope, and hurt all at once. The kindness of some employees shone like light in the darkness, but the bitterness of others lingered like a shadow. Walking back toward the doors, he realized something important. This wasn't about one employee or even two. It was about the culture inside the store. The kind of culture that allowed both kindness and cruelty to exist side by side. And deep down, he knew the time had come to face that truth. The CEO in disguise moved slowly through the aisles, still carrying the weight of the encounter at the electronics counter. His heart was heavy, but he clung to the kindness he had seen from the young woman in the clothing section and from Denise at the register. Maybe, he thought, the store was a place of mixed experiences, some good, some bad. But then, a few steps later, the moment that changed everything arrived. He had wandered into the home goods section. Rows of cookware and kitchen gadgets filled the shelves, shining under the bright overhead lights. As he reached for a set of pots, he heard quiet voices just a few feet away. Two employees were leaning against a shelf, their posture casual, their conversation careless. They hadn't seen him nearby. The first one tilted his chin slightly in the CEO's direction and smirked. "That guy over there? He's probably just here to look around. People like him never buy anything big." The words landed like a stone in the pit of his stomach. His hand froze on the handle of the pot he was holding. He stayed still, pretending to be interested in the product, but inside, his heart pounded. The second employee let out a laugh, shaking his head. "Yeah, look at him. He doesn't look like he's got the money for this stuff. Probably just killing time." Their voices weren't loud, but they carried enough sting to echo in his mind. To them, he was invisible, just another ordinary customer they felt comfortable mocking behind his back. They had no idea who he really was. They didn't see a successful businessman who had built this store from the ground up. They only saw a man in a hoodie, someone they assumed wasn't worth their respect. The CEO's jaw tightened. He lowered the pot carefully back onto the shelf, his movements slow so they wouldn't notice the tension in his body. He wanted to turn to confront them right there and then, but he stopped himself. He had promised that this visit was about discovery, not anger. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes, no matter how hard it was to swallow. Still, the comments cut deeper than he expected. He had faced challenges before, competitors, market downturns, financial risks. But this was different. This was personal. This was his own company, his own people, treating customers with bias and judgment. And if this was how they spoke about him, How many others had walked through these doors and experienced the same silent sting? He took a steadying breath and forced himself to move on. His eyes drifted to the checkout line where Denise was still working. She smiled at each customer, treating everyone with patience and care. Watching her, he felt a flicker of hope again. People like her carried the spirit he had always wanted for his company. But even as he admired her, the harsh words from the 2 employees echoed in his head. People like him never buy anything big. He doesn't look like he's got the money. Those phrases weren't just about poor service. They revealed something deeper, an attitude, a culture, a problem that had spread quietly under his nose. It wasn't just one lazy employee ignoring him. It was an environment where judgment and disrespect had been allowed to grow unchecked. As he stood there, pretending to browse another shelf, he realized something painful. This was not the company he had dreamed of building. Somewhere along the way, the values he had fought so hard to protect had slipped through the cracks, and the only way forward was to face that truth, no matter how much it hurt. He tightened the strap of his bag and made his way slowly toward the front of the store. The brightness of the lights felt harsher now. The cheerful music over the speakers felt hollow. Every step reminded him that he wasn't just an undercover shopper. He was the leader of this business, and what he had seen today demanded action. The comments he overheard would stay with him long after he left the store. They weren't just words spoken carelessly by 2 employees. They were a mirror reflecting something bigger, something he could no longer ignore. And as he walked toward the doors, he knew the time had come. The truth had revealed itself, and now he had to decide what to do with it. The man in disguise stepped outside the store for a moment, the warm afternoon sun pressing against his skin. He stood by his car, staring at the familiar logo above the entrance. That logo had once been a symbol of his dreams, a sign of everything he worked for, but after what he had just experienced, it felt heavier, almost like a weight. He thought about driving away, taking time to cool off before deciding what to do. But something inside him refused to leave. If he walked away now, the truth would remain hidden, buried beneath fake smiles and polite gestures. No, this was the moment to face it head on. With quiet determination, he turned and walked back inside. His steps were steady, though his heart pounded with emotion. He went straight to the customer service desk and asked to see the store manager. A few minutes later, a man in his late 40s appeared. His name tag read Brian. He approached with a polite but guarded look, the kind of expression managers often wear when they're not sure if a customer is about to complain. "How can I help you today, sir?" Brian asked. The disguised CEO extended his hand. "My name is Terrence Hall," he said calmly. "I'm the owner of this store." For a moment, the manager froze. His eyes widened, then darted quickly to the hoodie, the jeans, the canvas bag. He seemed caught between disbelief and embarrassment. "Mr. Hall," he stammered, quickly regaining his composure. It's an honor to meet you. If I'd known you were visiting, Terrence raised a hand gently, stopping him mid-sentence. "That's the point, Brian. You weren't supposed to know. I came here as a regular customer to see how things are really running when nobody's watching." His voice was calm, but firm. The manager's face flushed. I see." Terrence's gaze held steady. "What I saw today wasn't good. I was ignored at the electronics counter, dismissed when I asked questions, and even overheard employees making comments about me, judging what I could or couldn't afford just by looking at me." Brian's eyes flickered with unease. "I'm so sorry to hear that. I didn't know this was happening. I try to make sure the staff—" "I believe you," Terrence interrupted softly. "But this isn't just about one person. It's about a culture. Somewhere along the way, the values this company was built on have started to slip, and that's on me as much as anyone else." The manager lowered his head, clearly shaken. "I want you to gather the staff," Terrence said firmly. "All of them. Right now." Within minutes, the employees shuffled into the break room, their faces a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and nervous energy. Some leaned against the walls, others sat stiffly in chairs. The young man from electronics was there too, his phone tucked awkwardly into his pocket. Terrence stood at the front, no longer just a customer in a hoodie. His presence filled the room. He took a deep breath, letting the silence settle before he spoke. "Good afternoon," he began. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Terrence Hall. I'm the founder and CEO of this company. And today I walked into this store undercover, Not to trick you, not to embarrass you, but to see the truth for myself." The room fell completely silent. A few employees shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting toward one another. "What I found was troubling," Terrence continued. "Some of you showed kindness, professionalism, and the kind of respect this company was built on. And I thank you for that. But others failed to meet even the most basic standard of decency. I was ignored, dismissed, judged." His eyes landed on the young man from electronics. The employee's face drained of color, his earlier smirk nowhere to be found. Terrence didn't need to raise his voice. The disappointment in his tone was sharper than anger. "This isn't just about bad service," Terrence said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "It's about how we see people. About whether we choose to treat them with respect, no matter what they look like or what we think they can afford. Today I saw both the best and the worst of what this company has become, and I can tell you this, something has to change." The weight of his words hung in the air. Some employees bowed their heads in shame. Others, like Denise, looked at him with quiet support, as though relieved someone was finally addressing what they had silently noticed all along. Terrence paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I didn't build this company just to sell products. I built it to create something better. A place where every customer feels valued no matter who they are. Somewhere along the way we lost part of that vision. And that's not just your failure, it's mine. But today it stops. Today we begin again." The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was the silence of realization, of truth settling into people's hearts. The staff knew the CEO wasn't there to simply scold them. He was there to lead them back to what mattered most. And as Terrence stood before them, calm but resolute, they understood one thing. This wasn't just another company meeting. This was a turning point. The break room was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every word echo in the heart. Employees shifted in their seats, some staring at the floor, others glancing nervously at one another. The young man from electronics sat stiffly in the corner, his earlier arrogance replaced with unease. Denise, the cashier, watched with calm but steady eyes. She looked as though she had been waiting for this moment far longer than anyone realized. Terrence stood in front of them, his simple hoodie and jeans no longer a disguise but a reminder. A reminder that respect shouldn't depend on appearance, status, or assumptions. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of disappointment and the power of truth. "I want you all to listen carefully," he began. "I didn't come here today to embarrass anyone. I didn't come here to punish anyone either. I came here because I needed to know the truth. And the truth is that we are not living up to the values this company was built on." He let that sink in. Some employees shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Others nodded faintly, acknowledging the truth without words. "This company wasn't created to just sell products," Terrence continued, his eyes moving slowly from face to face. "It was created to serve people, to make them feel valued, to remind every person who walks through these doors that they matter. But what I saw today told me something very different." He paused, his gaze landing on the young electronics worker. The young man avoided eye contact, his face pale. When a customer, any customer, asks for help, it should never be treated as a burden. It should never be dismissed. And it should never, under any circumstances, be met with disrespect. His tone was firm, but it carried no cruelty. It was the voice of a leader who expected better. He turned his attention back to the group. "What hurt me most wasn't being ignored. It wasn't even being spoken to with impatience. What cut the deepest were the words I overheard, words that judged me not by what I asked, not by who I was, but by what I looked like. That kind of thinking has no place here. Not in this company, not ever." The weight of silence filled the room again. The two employees who had made those comments exchanged guilty glances, their shoulders shrinking. "But I need you all to understand something," Terrence continued, his voice softening. "This failure is not just on you. It's on me too. Somewhere along the way, I allowed distance to grow between leadership and the ground level. I trusted that the values we built this company on would carry themselves. But values are like a flame, they need to be protected and nurtured. If we ignore them, they burn out." He took a step closer, his tone shifting from disappointment to determination. "So here's what's going to happen. Starting today, every store, including this one, will have new training. Not just on products, not just on sales, but on respect, on bias, on how to treat people with dignity. Because treating people right is not a suggestion. It's the foundation of everything we do." The manager, Brian, nodded firmly, his face set with a new determination. A few employees straightened in their seats, sensing that this was more than just a lecture. It was a shift, a chance for something better. "I'll also be visiting more stores," Terrence continued, "and I won't announce it. Not because I want to catch anyone off guard, but because I want to see the truth. I need to stay connected to the experience of the customer. If something is broken, I need to know." For the first time, some of the employees leaned forward, listening intently. The nervous tension in the room began to soften. "And lastly," he said, his voice gentle now, "I want to hear from you. Not just today, but always. If you see problems, if you feel something isn't right, if leadership isn't living up to our values, I want to know. My door will always be open, and I'll make sure there's a way for you to speak up anonymously if you need to, because silence allows problems to grow, and I won't let that happen anymore." The room was no longer filled with fear. Instead, it was filled with something else: reflection, hope, and perhaps a little relief. Denise gave a small nod, her expression proud, as if to say, "This is what we've been waiting for." Terrence let out a slow breath, allowing his words to settle. Then he added one last piece, his tone softer, almost personal. "I built this company because I wanted to prove something, that it's possible to succeed in business while treating people with kindness. That a store can be more than shelves and registers. It can be a place where people feel respected. Somewhere along the way we lost some of that, but I'm not giving up, and I hope you won't either. Together, we can make this better." As the meeting ended, employees left the room quietly, some with heads bowed, others with thoughtful expressions. The young man from electronics lingered near the back, his face pale and tense. Terrence didn't single him out again. Instead, he hoped that the weight of what had been said would be enough to plant a seed of change. Before leaving, Terrence approached Denise. Her steady professionalism had shone like a light through the storm of his visit. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "The way you treat people. That's what this company was always meant to be." Denise smiled softly. "I just try to treat people the way I'd want to be treated," she said. Her words were simple, but they carried the very heart of the company's original promise. When Terrence walked out of the store for the final time that day, the sun was beginning to sink lower in the sky. He felt tired but not defeated. In fact, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would not be easy. Change never was, but he had faced the truth, and that was the first step. From this day forward, he would work to rebuild not just a business, but a culture. One where respect and kindness mattered more than numbers on a chart. As he drove away, he carried with him the memory of both the pain and the hope he had found that day. And though the sting of disrespect would never fully fade, it had given him something powerful, the clarity to see what needed to be done. Because in the end, real success is not measured by profit margins or growth charts. Real success is measured by how we treat people, especially when we think no one is watching. And that was a truth he would never forget.